Bullshit.
Pretend for a moment we've entered a parallel universe free of bullshit and full of bold solutions. That's what the No BS Marketing Show is all about. I'm your host, Dave Mastovich. Our guest today is Tom Rodriguez. But first, let's cut the bullshit. Where do you weigh in on marketing? Are you on the art side or science side? Ad agencies tend to fall into the Madison Avenue mindset. Madison Avenue, New York, where the majority of the big-time agencies are headquartered. And marketing is an art. We're the only ones that can build your brand. Creative drives the brand, and brand is king. Those on the science side love the digital aspect. They love the analytics. They're often more younger Gen Xers and even some millennials. They know what works with SEO, and they have all the terms. Keywords matter more than the story. Change that word so it helps you on the keyword side. The response rate, and therefore the ROI is trackable. Data is king. Analytics drive sales. Just like with politics, religion, sports, whatever, we seem to think there's only one way, our way, what we believe in. The reality when it comes to marketing is we need to leverage both the art and the science. The combination of those two is king. On this Thanksgiving episode, I want you to be thankful for your expertise on either one of those sides that you've mastered. And that's typically what's happened is most people in marketing have come up with one of those two sides being their strength, and they're strongly biased towards it, even if they wouldn't admit it. So if you believe passionately in the art, and that's what you've spent most of your energy on, be thankful. If you believe passionately in the science, and that's what you've spent most of your time on and energy on, be thankful because you know a key part of marketing. But from this day forth, from this Thanksgiving forth, invest in learning the other half, the other side. Spend the time gaining knowledge and becoming an expert in both the art and the science of marketing. I'm fortunate that most marketers aren't well-versed in both. Heck, I built a career prior to starting Mass Solutions and a company on that being a competitive advantage because most of the people I've encountered really are so biased and really are only experts at one side. But I also love to teach, coach, and mentor, and I know that our profession, marketing, won't ever gain the proper respect, the proper seat at the table until more marketing professionals are strong and passionate about both the art and science of marketing. The No BS Show is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/nobs. Try a book like The Girl with the Lower Back Tattoo by Amy Schumer. You can download it for free today, audibletrial.com/nobs for your free audiobook. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Our guest today is Tom Rodriguez. Tom is one of our rare repeat guests. In fact, he's the first non-family member to be a repeat guest since Carter is the only other pure guest to appear twice on the show. And I say pure guest because Suzanne has been a guest, a host, a contributor. Mike Gaddy's been a contributor, but the only other pure guest to appear twice on the show is a family member, Carter, my youngest son. So, Tom, you're sort of like family.
Thank you.
Tom has a diverse background. He's done stand-up comedy. He's a great storyteller, a writer, a basketball expert who has coached, trained, and led players for over a decade. He's an entrepreneur. He's passionate about selling and wants to learn more about No BS marketing. So he is an expert in both the art and the science. Tom, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Dave. Excited to be here again.
You look excited.
Yeah, well, I'm wondering how many people Thanksgiving week canceled on you, which is why I'm really here. But no, I look forward to any time that we have, both in office or on the road.
Well, it's the reason you're a repeat guest, and I'm looking to start a pattern here because I think when you were on the show, it was probably the most comfortable I was because you and I have known each other for so long, and we've worked on some marketing things together. We've also worked on some of our passion basketball together. And I thought, all these shows have these regular contributors. So you're going to become like one of my regular contributors, like Howard Stern has Stuttering John. Maybe that's
Maybe. Well, no, I like that because now when I tell people who have a hard time understanding what an entrepreneur I am and that I'm in sales and I represent many different companies and they ask what products do you sell, and it's so diverse, it's hard to tell people, what it is, explain what it is that I really do. So now I'm going to work it up to the point where when people ask what I do for a living, I'm just going to say I'm a consultant for Mass Solutions.
That's good. That's good. You'll get a lot of respect for that.
Yeah, well, absolutely. So, not that I ever think I'm gonna do anything else because I love what I do. But my time here would be a great resume builder if I were, 25 years younger.
That's the beauty of today's game. Today's game is you should have multiple things that you're part of. So this could be something you can be a contributor on regularly. You can talk about that when you're out doing your selling. You can say, I'm also on the No BS Marketing Show.
It's on my LinkedIn profile. Oh, absolutely.
So when you tell people that you're a regular contributor to the No BS Marketing Show, it'll be interesting to see what they say. They go, the no what?
Yeah, exactly. It's a lot more fun to talk about marketing than it is about sales. So although the two are very closely related.
Yes, two separate yet equally important groups. So Tom, it's the special Thanksgiving episode. You and I are going to dissect and discuss some of the marketing and storytelling aspects of Thanksgiving. So first, we're going to start right off with the history of Thanksgiving. Now, when the Mayflower Pilgrims and the, I guess how you pronounce this, Wampanoag Indians had the first Thanksgiving, it was 1621. Supposedly, it actually wasn't as big of a deal as the peace treaty they'd signed 7 months earlier, a peace treaty that lasted 50 years. And there's really not much of a historical record of the first Thanksgiving, which is partly why it didn't become a celebrated holiday until the 19th century, about 300 years later. Now, have you ever heard the name? Because I hadn't. I know you are a historian. Folks, Tom could be a professor of both English and history. But, Tom, do you recall the name Sarah Josepha Hale?
No.
Okay.
Not even close. And I'm not much of a historian.
So let me say this. I'd never heard of her, and I usually you remember some of these names from history, but she was famous for a number of things. And so this is going to get us going down the path. So
okay. Yeah.
She was a magazine editor, but she was the author of a song that is one of the all-time greatest. She's like one of the greatest one-hit wonder people. You know how they have the one-hit wonders?
Yeah,
on
right, absolutely.
She should be on there because she wrote the nursery rhyme, Mary Had a Little Lamb.
Wow. Wow, that's something.
So think about.
And she's also associated with Thanksgiving.
Well, think about that, though. If you wrote Mary Had a Little Lamb, now come on, that's bigger than the Macarena. Which is one of the biggest one-hit wonders.
The Mary Had a Little Lamb had a dance that goes with it, or no?
I don't think it did.
Okay, all right.
But like it's up there with "I'm Too Sexy," "Come On Eileen." It's a one-hit wonder of extreme import.
Uh-huh.
So Sarah Josepha Hale, magazine editor and author of the nursery rhyme "Mary Had a Little Lamb," launched a campaign, a marketing campaign to establish Thanksgiving as a national holiday. Now get this, because I know you're a big disciplined guy as far as attention to detail, repetitive practices with basketball when you and I talk. For 36 years, 36 years, Tom, she published editorials and sent letters to governors, senators, and presidents telling them that they should make Thanksgiving a holiday.
And that was in what year?
Well, she started in like 1828 or something because it wasn't until 1863 when, after that repetition of message.
Right.
People talk now about using email campaigns and Twitter posts and getting multiple touches is what we tell our clients. She had 36 years of multiple touches to governors, senators, and presidents. And finally, Abraham Lincoln, in one of the biggest moves of his career, one of his legacy builders, it's probably on that list.
Yeah.
He did a lot of good stuff.
Yeah.
But this is not mentioned much in his legacy, but it should be. In 1863, President Lincoln scheduled Thanksgiving for the final Thursday in November. Didn't make it an official holiday. He just got on the bully pulpit and said, this is when we're going to do Thanksgiving. 36 years. Mary Had a Little Lamb.
Yeah, how about that?
So this is going to be in the show notes.
Okay. Are there photographs of this gal?
We're going to find some pictures of Sarah Hell.
I mean, well, because back then, I mean, people didn't even live they didn't live very long. So she was doing that for 36 years. That was a majority of her life.
Yeah.
She was
impressive.
The No BS Marketing Podcast with Dave Mastovich is brought to you by Mass Solutions. Put our 3-step No BS process to work for you. Visit masssolutions.biz today to take your marketing to another level. It's all about bold solutions, no BS.
So then, after that repetition of message, because this show, the No BS Marketing Show, Tom, is about leadership, communication, storytelling. So that's telling you about how she marketed it. And it becomes from 1863 for almost about 70 years, I guess, until 1939. It was the final Thursday in November. So 1939, being the historian that you are, our country was going through the Great
Depression.
There you go. He's quick.
It was at the tail end of it, though.
Yes, you're right.
Because I do, my grandfather, who's still living and doing pretty well at 95, he was born in 1921. And he would tell stories, of what it took. They were poor outside of the Great Depression, and during the Great Depression was just a sad time. There was just nothing there.
And the messaging that this show, in all seriousness, is about storytelling. You know the phrase "dirt poor."
Absolutely.
And I'm going to assume that's because they didn't have the floor of their house was dirt.
Right.
Right. Okay. So you think about the strength of messaging. Dirt poor came from probably that era.
Yeah.
So the president at that time was Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who ended up being our longest tenured president. He had an idea. He had a marketing strategy. He thought, let's move the holiday up a week to spur retail sales during the Great Depression.
Genius move.
Doesn't it seem like a genius move?
It does. I mean, that's where we are today, right?
No. So listen, his suggested change was so roundly criticized. And they didn't have Fox or MSNBC on the right or the left. So imagine this. Back in 1939, a campaign was created calling it Frank's Giving, playing off of Franklin. Frank's Giving, making fun of what was called an overreach of power by Franklin Delano Roosevelt. So this creative messaging forced the president to reverse course and said, well, then let's officially make it a bill that officially makes it the fourth Thursday in November. So it's kind of the same as the final.
So he changed his tune. He had this great marketing idea.
And he changed his tune.
Because everybody was against him. I would be curious as to what the retailers at that time thought. I'll bet you that the retailers were in support of it.
I agree. I'll bet Sean Hannity had a segment supporting it.
Yeah, I'll bet. But no, okay, so he changed it back.
He basically didn't go with his instinctual move to try to help spur retail sales. But what he did do was he made it an official holiday. What Abe Lincoln did was just recognize that this is when we're going to celebrate it. Since he tried to change it, he went and said, well, then we better make this official. So the bill was signed in 1939 by FDR.
To make it the final Thursday, the fourth Thursday.
Fourth Thursday, which he changed because he had to save some grace. He called it the fourth Thursday, but it would have to be the final. I mean, I don't see how it could be a fifth unless there'd be suddenly 35 days in a month.
Okay, good. So now that had to change again at some point.
No, that's what we are.
We're still the fourth Thursday.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So what are we going to be Thursday? The 24th, the 17th would be one, the 10th, and the 30th.
Third. Yeah. Okay. All right.
So speaking of creative messaging, so when you go back and you know that I prepped for this show, I probably spent 12, 13 minutes
before we walked in here
prepping for the show. But was the storytelling around Thanksgiving was so strong, and it often mentioned turkey in the early years. There's not a lot of proof from the first couple of Thanksgivings that was the case, but it was mentioned over the eras, and the Sarah Hale woman probably mentioned turkey. So now 90% of Americans eat turkey on Thanksgiving Day. And the National Turkey Federation pounced on that idea and promoted it as the main course for about the past 50, 60 years to just make sure there was no chance that you'd get more than 10, 15%. So think about how, from a messaging standpoint, that has pretty much driven the turkey industry.
It's probably made the turkey industry.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's been promoted in the last, 10, 15 years as a healthier meat.
Yes.
With the whole diet craze and Weight Watching and all that. But without Thanksgiving, I mean, probably 25% of the entire sales of turkey in a year are around that day.
You're
it would be
right.
Turkey would be it would be looked upon as a junk meat, like bologna, like what we grew up on.
Indeed. So the power of messaging, the power of storytelling, has turned it into where turkey survived as an item, and then, like you said, in the last 10, 15, maybe 20 years, been promoted as a healthy alternative, and also through an Adam Sandler song. I'm going to play that song at my house on Thanksgiving. So let's talk about your Thanksgiving. What's your favorite food on Thanksgiving? What's your favorite part of Thanksgiving?
Well, I do love to eat.
Mm-hmm.
I do love to eat, and in my house growing up, the Thanksgiving Day football games were very much a part. Number one, there wasn't much else on TV other than the parades in the morning.
Yes,
and then we sat around. I distinctly remember from 8, 10 years old. My brother and I, my grandparents had a fireplace, and we would be in charge of the fire, and we would park it. We'd lay next to the fire and not far from the television, and we'd park it there for 6 hours. At that time, there were only 2 Thanksgiving Day games. And man, I just couldn't get me up off that spot, except to reload at the table or hit the men's room. But that was Thanksgiving for me for years, and I was perfectly okay with it. Not real exciting, but man, I just loved that.
Me too. You talked about parades. It's amazing how storytelling, marketing, messaging, tradition. Storytelling leads to tradition, and messaging and storytelling drive tradition in many instances. In the 1920s, parades were common all across the country. Not sure why, but there were parades on Thanksgiving all across the country. And then the Macy's parade became absolutely huge and started to own the day. So you still see parades sometimes the day before, a couple of days before, sometimes maybe still that day. But Macy's had their first parade in 1924, and that's now become a big part of the holiday. Have you ever been to the Macy's parade?
I have not. Shame to say, but I have not.
I went to one. And it's a pretty amazing experience. My kids were just the right age. I'm going to guess Carter was probably maybe 5, so that would make Alec and Brevin like 10, somewhere around that age. So it was a really good age because the older ones weren't old enough to dislike it yet.
Right.
And the younger one was completely in awe whenever there was SpongeBob was 27 feet big. But you talk about an amazing tradition. That is a heck of an event.
I mean, getting close to 75 years, 100 years?
Yeah. Yeah, that would be 1924. So do that quick math. 92. Mm-hmm. It's the 92nd year, right?
Yeah.
Wow. And then football. So you're talking about football. So a couple of things we're going to talk about, and going to tell some stories ourselves based on some history and some, I guess, you never know the whole truth of some of this stuff that happened in the 100-some years ago. But in 1876, your alma mater, Yale, and Princeton decided to have their big rivalry game on Thanksgiving. And so that was the first kind of historic, nationally known game. So Yale versus Princeton. What do you remember most about your years at Yale?
Well, I think what happened there was that I started at Yale and then realized that Penn State would be a better option.
A better fit.
Yeah, exactly. Especially when it came to the nightlife and whatnot. But no, I found it interesting that the Thanksgiving tradition really started with a collegiate game, and because all that I remember are the the pro games. So
well, the interesting thing, we do have a local connection to the first professional Thanksgiving Day football game, and that was the first pro game was here in Pittsburgh with the Allegheny Athletic Association team hosting the game.
wow.
Now, this is where it gets cool, and you and I are going to talk a little bit about this. So in 1905 and 1906, two of the top professional teams at that time decided to play 2 years in a row on Thanksgiving Day, and they were really well known. They were kind of like Patriots and Steelers, Patriots and Cowboys, Steelers and Cowboys, whoever two of your top pro teams are. And those two teams were Latrobe, Pennsylvania, and Canton, Ohio, and they played on Thanksgiving. So now here's the interesting part of that. So you think, wow, what Latrobe, Pennsylvania, it's right up the street from us. It's where the Steelers hold their camp. It's got a lot of history. Arnold Palmer recently passed away. And then Canton, Ohio is known for
Hall of Fame.
Hall of Fame. So when the NFL decided to have a Hall of Fame, they said, let's go with the first two cities that had played in the early years that were powerhouses. And let's decide between those two. And Canton got it. Now, there's a rumor, and I couldn't substantiate much of this online, just as it was just a lot of saying that this happened. But apparently Latrobe fumbled, to use a cliche, fumbled the opportunity, and there was actually community people that didn't want it. So there was enough of a faction that didn't want it for whatever reason. I don't have all the facts on that. So it was down to those two, and Canton pushed harder, and Latrobe kind of said, nah. So think of how that would change lives of so many of us.
It was a huge miss for Latrobe. Back then, I'm sure the residents at that time, thought nothing of it. We just don't want it. But now, I mean, it would change things economically for that city, which Latrobe does fairly well. Mm-hmm. It's a pretty astute community. But it's Arnold Palmer was a legend there. Still spent, I believe, the majority of the year there. Mm-hmm. And with his passing now, they really don't have anything to hang their hat on. But big miss for Latrobe, big one. And Canton, I can't, the Hall of Fame, I can't imagine what numbers wise it brings in as far as, out of town visitors. If you haven't been there at least once, anybody that loves football, makes a trip there at some point. If they do it as kids, and then they take their kids, and on and on and on. So, and outside of the Hall of Fame, I don't even know economically like what Canton's strengths are. So, it was a big miss for Latrobe, but Canton embraced it, and they do well with it, and that's just something that's going to be there forever. So,
I had one guest who is a Latrobe native, and we talked about the Latrobe, and he said it's Latrobe.
It's Latrobe. That's how I always.
Yeah, he said it's not French. Then, in 1966, the NFL is trying to get people to play on Thanksgiving, so they approached one of their newer teams, an expansion team, and urged them to play on Thanksgiving. And since at that time there was no game even on Monday night, there was only Sunday afternoons. No Sunday night, no Monday night, no Thursday, nothing. So this team, this expansion team says, okay, if we're going to do this, then we're all in. We want to guarantee that we will be on year after year after year. And you talk about serendipity, luck, wise decision-making all combined. The NFL and this team, the Dallas Cowboys, becomes America's team.
Right.
And ends up being on Thanksgiving Day from 1966 through today. There was a 2-year period, 2 seasons, when they decided to shift it to St. Louis in 1975 and 1977, and they did not perform as well from a fan base standpoint or a popularity standpoint across the country. So those are the only 2 years that the Cowboys have not been on since 1966 when they began as a team.
Well, yeah, great decision on their part. And now, just out of curiosity, I'd imagine that in 66 that the Thanksgiving Day games were all televised, correct?
I'm going to bet yes.
Okay, because I remember as a kid, that, not there was a very small percentage of the games were televised. And I remember even there were some Pittsburgh Steeler games based on where they were. I don't know if it was based on being sold out at the visiting stadium or whatnot, but I remember seeing a vast majority of them. But I do remember from time to time that there were Steeler games that weren't televised.
Yes. There's one famous one that was blacked out. The Immaculate Reception. Right. So when people claim they saw the Immaculate Reception, they are flat out lying. I was a little kid, and my brother and I were listening to it on the radio. It was blacked out.
Wow.
Is that crazy?
That is crazy. And what's crazier is that I don't believe there's any video footage, like today when they do go to replay and they have all these different angles. But I don't believe there was any profound video of whether or not Franco caught that ball.
You never see the full play from one shot of the full play. You see that start of the play, then you see him. You see a big shot of him with his hands.
The ball's already coming up off the ground in his hands. Though. You don't see whether he caught it or not.
Exactly, and you just think it's voted the number one play in the history of the NFL by NFL Network, and you don't really have that footage that just lets the play run. And I don't understand.
Right, and what I think most amazing about it is that nobody, Franco has, I don't believe he's ever come out and ever said definitively, I caught that ball or I didn't catch that ball.
And Frenchy Fuqua has always claimed that he'll tell you when he dies or whatever, whether he touched the ball illegally because...
back then, an offensive player, only one offensive player could touch it.
Yes.
Right, because back then, had Fuqua touched the ball during that collision, then Franco could not have legally, whether he caught that ball or not, he couldn't have done it, which is kind of a dumb rule.
So the beauty of today is that play that changed the history of the NFL would be overturned after further review.
Based on what was called on the field.
No, you're right. Because it was called on the field a catch, they probably wouldn't have overturned it. There would have been inconclusive evidence.
Correct, because they wouldn't have had the angle.
They just said, after further review, play stands as called. Let's talk about football games in the remaining part on our Thanksgiving Day episode of the No BS Marketing Show. I'm Dave Mastovich with Tom Rodriguez, our special guest. He's back. He was here to talk about his business and his entrepreneurial spirit in one of the earlier episodes of the No BS Marketing Show. He's the first non-family member, pure guest to be on the show multiple times. He's got a diverse background of doing comedy bits and routines, starting his own company, being a sales expert. He's also a basketball coach and trainer and one-on-one individual instruction person, and he's been involved in the community quite a bit. So Tom Rodriguez, let's talk football on Thanksgiving Day. You gave your memory of laying at your grandparents' house on the floor with your brother. You two were in charge of the fire, and you watched football all day. Let's start with an old memory. What's the oldest memory of a game that stands out to you?
Well, the one that stands out, and we had chatted about this a bit earlier, but the one I don't recall there being a lot of really fantastic games on, nail biters, whatnot, on Thanksgiving Day. But I do remember, there are two. The oldest would be I believe 93 or so, the Leon Lett incident when, the field goal. For the football fans that have been around as long as you and I have been, is Dallas blocked what would have been a game-winning field goal for Miami. There was snow. I remember it was snowing like crazy, and the ball went forward. Okay, and Leon Lett did not know that ball was pretty much dead. Unless someone from the offensive team, someone from the defensive team went to make a play on that ball. When the ball goes backwards at the line of scrimmage, it's open game. When the ball goes forward, it's just like a punt, it just rolls around and ends up dead. Well, Leon Lett, for some reason, thought he needed to cover the ball, and he went up and he slid and he booted it around, and Miami fell on it. They got one more chance at the field goal with 3 seconds left, and they kicked the field goal to win the game.
How about the craftiness of the Dolphins players pretending
to pick it up?
They were trying to get it.
That's right.
Had the dents
Right.
Leon led to think, oh.
Yeah, I bet, yeah, exactly. Yeah, he got duped into that. Right.
That's crafty.
Well, it's one thing to be defined by a situation like that. It didn't hurt the Cowboys. I think they won the Super Bowl that year anyway. And Leon Lett was part of maybe all four of their titles.
In that Super Bowl, the same thing, another thing he's remembered for happened. He picks up a fumble running all the way for a touchdown, tries to imitate
showboating it.
Irvin. He said he wanted to imitate Irvin.
Right.
He sticks his arm out low.
Yeah. And Don Beebe
comes
slapped it away through the end zone yeah.
So that's his two in the same 6-month period.
But see, he's fortunate because he wasn't going to be outcast like Bill Buckner because the Cowboys went on to win Super Bowls that year anyway.
Yeah.
So, those that could have worked out a lot worse for him. But yeah, I remember that one. That one jumps out at me, and then because we're Pittsburghers, the Jerome Bettis coin toss, in overtime with Phil Luckett, maybe the official was. That's the other one that stands out.
And Jerome says heads no tails, switches his call
right in the middle of the air, right.
And Luckett had to go with the first call, and Luckett did the right thing, but like, what's Bettis thinking?
Well, and of course, Bettis tried to play it out as, oh no, I that's what I called. I called that, the whole thing.
He forgot there's a microphone there.
Yeah, right.
So, from the storytelling standpoint, how about just in general, how the Dallas Cowboys became America's team, and it just became such a big deal in the 70s into the 80s, when they kind of stunk by the mid 80s. Then they came back and were incredible in the 90s. But the messaging standpoint, America's team, what's your thought on that?
Well, they became a brand because, their owners were wise enough, like the story you told. They took a slot, there as a newer franchise, they took a slot, on Thanksgiving Day, and a lot of that, a lot of marketing is getting your message out there. And so the country was treated to the Dallas Cowboys, whether they wanted to see them or not, and then, winning trumps everything. So not only are they putting themselves on the national stage, they began winning ball games. And then, and again, more and more people that, they became America's team more than anything else is because people were exposed to them. That was to their credit. And they've maintained that to some degree, not the way that it was in the 70s or the 90s. Like recently, they're winning this year. And you have, generation after generation. Just because your father is a Dallas Cowboy fan, I don't think in today's day and age means that you're a Dallas Cowboy fan. Again, it's all predicated on winning.
Right.
But the Cowboys have done a great job in branding. And now that for those people that have remained Dallas Cowboy fans, and now they're winning ball games this year, and they have young talent again. Well, that whole America's team, theme is out there. I was talking, and I don't know if this is true or not, but this is a good Pittsburgh story. Back in the 70s, a reporter approached Art Rooney, and he said to him, and this was this was in the late 70s when the Steelers, were a better football team. The Steelers had won more Super Bowls, and they said to Mr. Rooney, they said, Mr. Rooney, what do you think about, as far as the success goes, the Steelers have been the best franchise in this decade, but Dallas is talked about as being America's team. He said, what do you think about that? He said, do you think that the Steelers ought to be called America's team? And Rooney told the guy, he said, listen, make no bones about it. We're not America's team. We're the Pittsburgh Steelers. I thought that was kind of neat.
That is. It is. It's great messaging. And when you compare those two franchises in the 70s, both had a great story to tell. Part of the reason, winning is absolutely part of the reason. It's the biggest part because you're not going to remember it if you're not good. But the Cowboys also had a couple of strong visual elements from a branding standpoint. Their coach stood out in a unique way because he wore a suit and a hat, and he was there 29 years. Their quarterback was the All-American military service guy,
decorated Navy guy.
cut,
Yep,
and he was small.
correct.
And we always liked the little guy.
That's right.
So you had that. Then you throw in some of the other characters. They had names like Too Tall Jones. Now that's messaging in the as best as you can get it.
Yeah.
Too Tall Jones. And Tony Dorsett changed his name to Dorset. But they had all those elements, and then the white and blue and the star, just the half Astrodome. So like they basically had so many unique things. And they were winning, and they were such a contrast to the other story. The other story was we're the blue-collar guy.
Right.
We're the shot-in-a-beer guy.
Right.
We're the guy with no teeth, the linebacker.
Yeah, right.
Our quarterback's bald at 25.
Right.
And, and he's supposedly can't spell cat. If you give him the
had
C
been
in
married
there.
multiple times, which was not common in the 70s. You didn't have guys on their second and third marriage in the 70s. That was unheard of.
So the Pittsburgh story was the flawed human story, and the Dallas Cowboy story of the 70s was the idealist, Ozzie and Harriet story. And we all know the flawed human beings tend to win.
It's relatable.
Yes,
it's relatable,
and that's a big piece of message.
And for two fantastic organizations with two very distinct messages from from other ends of the spectrum, and it's still, I mean, the Cowboys are still a name, and the whole Steeler Nation thing is countrywide.
Yes, absolutely. It's the No BS Marketing Show special Thanksgiving episode with Tom Rodriguez. We've talked about the Thanksgiving history and the messaging behind that. We've talked about the turkey being impacted by messaging, how parades became a big part of the tradition, and of course football with its historical ties. The first pro game played here in Pittsburgh, then also Latrobe, Pennsylvania, being a part of the 1905 and 1906 games. And then I guess we might as well just touch slightly on Black Friday and what it's become, and how Thanksgiving, it's not even Black Friday anymore, it's Black Thursday. Your thoughts on the retail messaging over the last 30 years? Well,
you said the whole Black Friday thing. I mean, now that you're right, it's become Black Thursday, and everybody's just trying to get. And I don't blame them. And I don't know. You would probably know who the first company, retailer, whatnot, to start the whole. I believe it started with the opening up at 5 a.m. maybe on Thanksgiving Day, and then it went to 11 o'clock or a midnight thing on Thanksgiving, and now the Walmart and whatnot, they start their deals at 6 o'clock, 8 o'clock. I mean, I don't blame them. When you think about it, Thanksgiving tradition in my home, we laid around all day and ate and drank and watched football games. Come 6 o'clock Thanksgiving night, there's not much going on except maybe a continuation of what you did all day. So, to move the whole Black Friday thing into Thursday, I mean, I think it's, I'm all for it. I mean, if I was a part of any type of retailer anymore, I mean, I would want to just get out ahead of everybody. And now, because so many retailers are opening early, it's become, what's it going to take to get you into my store versus my competitor's store? And, from my experience being in retail 10 years, it's the loss leaders. What are you giving away? 50-inch big screen for, $300, or, you name it. But, hey, I don't blame, I don't think that it's really done anything to tarnish the reputation of the holiday. It's just the way that it is. And retail's such a competitive game. I don't choose to be a part of the whole Black Friday thing, but I get why people would.
It's interesting because there was a few years where there was this Cyber Monday, probably about 8 years, maybe 10. And then I think that's still relevant, because if you do work on Monday, you're probably going to spend some time online shopping. But now the push has been so much online sales today and on Thanksgiving and on Friday and on Saturday and Sunday. It'll be interesting to see this year because last year there was a slip on Cyber Monday. It wasn't as big as it was the previous 5 years. It's kind of just now a constant push from basically today, a couple of days before Thanksgiving, the whole way through the rest of the way.
Well, the Cyber Monday thing, I don't do a lot of shopping online. But if I were still in the retail game, my take on it is I believe a lot of that has been driven because they've offered a lot of the same deals and a lot of the same specials that they had in their stores. But ultimately, I believe somebody's going to spend more if they are in person visiting your store. And even if they come in for that one item, you got them in the store, they're likely to spend more money while they've made the trip and in your store. Like you said, Cyber Monday, people are going to be spending some time, but a lot of people got to go back to work. So they may say, hey, I got to get this or I got to get that, but they're not going to spend an inordinate amount of time just browsing. When you're physically in a store, I think that you're there. So if you compare the sales numbers, just a guess, I would guess that somebody's going to spend more if they're physically in the store versus shopping Target online.
Talk about that from your standpoint with your business. How's it impacted in the holiday season?
My business, from a retail perspective, what I do and who I'm selling to these days, the holiday seasons don't really have a significant impact. I mean, I do sell to independent garden centers and hardware stores that do a lot in the way of Christmas trees, accessories, that kind of thing. But that's not really driven by advertising. That's just driven by, building a brand and knowing you can go to your local garden center or hardware store to pick up your tree and then things to go with it. So since I've been out of retail, which has been now, I've been, almost 20 years now, the holiday seasons have really been a time of rest for me, which is kind of nice.
Something to be thankful for.
Absolutely.
What didn't we talk about that you thought we might talk about today on the special Thanksgiving episode of the No BS Marketing Show?
Well, I guess I thought maybe we would talk a little bit about, since we're talking about Thanksgiving and football, talk about the NFL and its branding, and
that's
how,
a great point.
How the NFL product is thought of right now.
Great point. What's your take? Because it's been interesting to watch these ratings plummet.
Well, see, I'm a football purist. I love football, so I'd be watching the NFL no matter what. But given from the perspective of the average fan, and how you continue to build a brand, the real test of building a brand, I think, when it comes to NFL is if you can get the casual fan. The Super Bowl is still the biggest one-day event in sports. Okay, but who watches the Super Bowl? You got to build that on the casual fan, and I think the ratings are reflective of the casual fans not really showing as much interest.
I agree. I think the product itself has changed so much, and then there are so many other extenuating circumstances. So from the youth level, you've seen the significant decline in youth participation. Right. That's probably mostly driven by the concussion fears. The last 5 years has been such a strong messaging campaign about the concussions. So that's probably what's driving some of the youth decline. That might be driving some of the NFL decline, but the NFL decline could be a couple of other things. I think one is the product has changed so much, and the scoring is so much higher, and it's so much easier to score. You're not really ever out of a game. So it's just not there's something about it. It's just not
it's not as good a product.
It's just not as good a product because it's 21-7 in the third quarter, and you're like, oh, they can still win.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just a different mindset. And then you can watch it whenever you want. You can go to the red zone and only watch the scores.
Teams are ready to score,
And the fantasy has the younger generation more into the stats. So now you don't really have to watch the game for the nuances of the game.
You watch the game on your phone.
So you watch the game on your phone and only watch the highlights because you can actually pick the 17 cool plays and just watch those 17 plays that are.
That's right.
7 of them are turnovers or long plays, and another 10 are the scores, because there's typically 6 to 10 scores in a game, if not more. Sometimes you're getting 42 to 35, whatever. So it does seem like the product has changed, and then they have so many extracurricular things that have impacted it with the negative abuse, physical abuse, notable stories, and some of the drug stories, and then cheating, and then of course the protesting with the national anthem. There's just a whole lot of that, plus the scoring issue, plus you can get it anytime you want, and the red zone, plus the concussion issue. It's a lot to overcome, and yet they're still far and away America's national pastime and still the number one sport.
Oh yeah. I mean, you can, it's hard to make a big deal about the ratings being down because it's still such a huge industry.
Yes.
And it will continue to be a huge industry. Now, the one thing that we touched on, that over time, and I'm talking about over decades, I think the concussion thing, may be the biggest, the hardest to overcome, because you're talking about, with less participation at the youth level, that, over time, when these kids become teenagers and in their 20s, they may not have an interest in pro football like so many of us did. I mean, we basically had about 3 sports available to us: football, baseball, and basketball. Kids nowadays have soccer, have volleyball, have golf, lacrosse. Hockey, right? So over time, with less young men participating in football, over time when they have kids and then their kids have kids, perhaps that's going to hurt viewership because you have less people, interested in football. But it's such a huge industry, and it's never going away. And, you want to make a big deal about the ratings being down, the numbers being down. I don't think Goodell and the owners are worried all that much. I just don't think that they are. I'm sure they want to restore their reputation and clean up things and all that. But ultimately, I don't think they're all that worried.
And I think they've done, over the history of the NFL, they've done a fantastic job of messaging. They've been the best of the pro sports on messaging by far, and they've done the most creative things. And although it led to a little bit of saturation when they made the move to Monday Night Football, that changed the NFL in the 70s. Then they added Sunday, and then they added Thursday. And yes, there's a saturation issue, but it's an event in your city. When there's a game here on a Thursday night, the buzz here is just incredible. Yeah. They've done the best job of messaging. I agree that they're not dead. They're not even in significant decline. It's just they were on such an upward trajectory for 15, 20 years. You think about it, in the 80s it was big, but the 80s compared to the late 90s is nothing. It was some huge growth. And then the late 90s till the mid-2000s, it was huge growth. So this is the first time they've leveled or declined slightly, but they're still far and away still the king.
Absolutely.
That's Tom Rodriguez. Tom, thanks for being on the Thanksgiving episode of the No BS Marketing Show.
Thanks for having me, Dave. Look forward to the next time.
We're going to bring you back. Next time we're going to bring you back so you can be more comfortable.
Maybe we'll do something around March Madness.
That's what we got to do, is March Madness for sure. To our listeners, thanks for joining us for the No BS Marketing Show. I'm thankful to have our many listeners, and I hope you have a great Thanksgiving. Go to masssolutions.biz for show notes plus additional marketing and messaging resources, and sign up for Light Reading, which is our weekly compilation email blast that goes out to talk about the podcast and talk about some of the other writings and resources and tips that I have for you. You'll get valuable strategies that can transform your marketing and your message. It really is light, intended to be read in a couple of minutes, and it just might trigger bright ideas for you. Again, sign up by going to masssolutions.biz. And remember, ask yourself, what's the big idea? And build your story around the answer. It's all about bold solutions